The sky above the mountain road was a heavy shade of gray, almost black, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Isabella adjusted the rearview mirror of her BMW, her fingers tapping impatiently on the leather steering wheel. She had left the city hours ago, but traffic and a late meeting had slowed her down. The mountain road stretched endlessly before her, winding and narrow with sharp curves that vanished into the dense fog. Isabella was used to speed, control, and precision. Her life had always been carefully organized, measured in schedules, meetings, and deadlines. She wore designer suits, drove luxury cars, and lived in a world where everything could be bought or fixed with the right amount of money. Yet tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, she was just a woman alone on a dark, isolated road, surrounded by shadows and the unknown. The fog thickened, curling around the car like a living thing. She squinted through the windshield, straining to see the edges of the road. The headlights of her BMW cut only a short path ahead, revealing jagged rocks on one side and steep drops on the other. The silence of the mountains pressed against her, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Isabella took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "It's just a long road," she muttered to herself. "I'll get through it. Nothing can go wrong." But as she spoke, a strange shudder ran through the car. At first she ignored it, thinking it was a small bump or an uneven patch of road. Then it came again, stronger this time. The engine coughed, a sharp, painful sound that made her stomach tighten. She pressed the accelerator, but the car hesitated, the shuddering intensifying. The dashboard lights flickered, and the engine let out a final groan before going completely silent. The car coasted to a stop near the edge of the road, and Isabella's heart leapt into her throat. "Not now," she whispered, panic rising. She turned the key again and again, but the engine remained dead. The car had stopped in the middle of the winding road, with nothing but darkness ahead and behind. She reached for her phone only to find that there was no signal. Her pulse quickened. The city, her office, her life of control and certainty, none of it could help her here. For the first time in years, Isabella felt powerless. The thought made her chest tighten. She had always believed that money could solve every problem, that connections and influence were all she needed to navigate the world. But tonight, on this lonely mountain road, all of that seemed meaningless. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it an eerie emptiness. She tried to stay calm, opening the car door and stepping onto the cold, uneven asphalt. The fog pressed around her, wrapping her in a damp chill. Every sound seemed amplified. The distant hoot of an owl, the crack of a branch somewhere off the road, her own shallow breathing. She walked around the car, checking the tires and engine as best as she could. She was no mechanic, but years of experience in business had taught her how to stay composed in emergencies. Still, nothing she did worked. The engine was dead, and the darkness of the mountain seemed to swallow her whole. Isabella returned to the driver's seat and locked the doors, wrapping her arms around herself. She thought of calling for help, but without a signal, even that was impossible. She considered walking down the road to find another car or a house, but the mountain was steep and treacherous, and the night was deep. Every option seemed dangerous, every thought fraught with risk. Her mind wandered to the life she had left behind for this moment. She thought of her high-rise apartment, her expensive wardrobe, her luxury lifestyle, all carefully curated, all meticulously controlled. And yet none of it mattered here. She was alone, vulnerable and entirely at the mercy of circumstance. The realization brought a shiver, not just from the cold, but from the stark truth. Life could change in an instant, and no amount of wealth could shield her from it. Hours seemed to pass, though it might have been only minutes, before she heard the faint hum of an approaching vehicle. Her pulse jumped and she squinted into the fog, desperate for a sign of help. The headlights appeared slowly, growing brighter, until they revealed a small, rugged truck moving cautiously along the winding road. Isabella felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Who could this be at this hour? A passerby, a neighbor, a traveler like her? The truck slowed as it approached her BMW and finally stopped. A man stepped out, tall and calm, with a kind expression that seemed to glow faintly in the dark mist. His presence was reassuring yet unfamiliar, and Isabella felt a strange mix of caution and hope. "Car trouble?" the man asked, his voice steady and gentle. He didn't speak with authority or superiority, only a simple, honest concern. Isabella nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Yes, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck." Her pride, so carefully maintained for years, wavered in the face of her helplessness. The man smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I can help." He introduced himself as Ethan and immediately began examining the engine. Isabella watched him, impressed by his calm, methodical approach. Every movement was confident but unassuming. She felt a flicker of relief, a sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone. As Ethan worked, Isabella reflected on her life. She had always measured people by their power, wealth, or status. But here in the mountains, all of that seemed irrelevant. She realized with an unexpected sting of humility that she had spent too long judging others and relying too much on material security. Life, she understood now, could not always be controlled. And sometimes, it took moments like this, dark, frightening, uncertain moments, to remind a person of what truly mattered. Ethan's hands moved skillfully over the engine, adjusting wires, checking components, and listening to the BMW's quiet protests. Isabella stayed close, asking questions, listening, and learning, not about business, finance, or power, but about the small, practical acts that could save a life or a moment of despair. The fog pressed closer, and the night grew colder. But Isabella no longer felt entirely alone. For the first time in a long time, she felt a connection. Not a superficial connection built on transactions and appearances, but a human one, quiet, steady, and real. Hours, or perhaps only minutes, passed in a strange rhythm, broken only by the occasional hum of the engine or the wind through the trees. Isabella realized that sometimes the simplest gestures, a helping hand, a kind word, a steady presence could have more value than any amount of money or status. As she watched Ethan work, she felt a stirring of gratitude she had rarely experienced. Not gratitude for possessions, not gratitude for control, but gratitude for human kindness, for a stranger willing to step into the darkness and help without expectation. She didn't know how this night would end. She didn't know if the car would ever start again, or if she would reach home safely. But for the first time, she understood something profound. Life was not about what one owned or achieved. Life was about the moments of connection, the acts of compassion, and the courage to face uncertainty with an open heart. The wind howled, the fog swirled, and the mountains seemed endless. But Isabella no longer felt fear alone. She felt a fragile hope, a flicker of light in the darkness, carried not by money or power, but by the simple presence of a kind stranger willing to help her in her moment of need. The fog hung thickly over the mountain road, curling around the trees and the lonely BMW like a soft, suffocating blanket. Isabella watched Ethan move with calm precision, his hands deftly checking wires, testing the engine, and adjusting small components. She leaned against the car, her arms crossed over her chest, trying to keep warm. The cold had begun to seep into her bones, but there was something more than the chill affecting her. A strange mixture of fear, anticipation, and curiosity. For years, Isabella had lived in a world of certainty. Her days were measured in schedules, appointments, and tasks, and her nights often spent in comfort and luxury. She was used to having solutions within reach, people to call, money to fix any problem. But here, stranded in the mountains, all that certainty had vanished. She realized that no amount of wealth could summon warmth, safety, or comfort when the night was so dark, the road so lonely, and the world so unpredictable. Ethan glanced at her, noticing her shiver. "Are you cold?" he asked, his voice steady and gentle without any hint of judgment. Isabella hesitated, almost embarrassed by her answer. She was used to maintaining control, to projecting strength and composure even in private moments. But here in the middle of the dark road, all of that seemed insignificant. "A little," she admitted, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. He nodded, not offering a coat, not offering pity, just acknowledging the truth of the moment. There was a calmness in him that made her feel unexpectedly safe. "The night can be harsh here," he said, "but the car is almost ready. I think we'll have it running soon." As he worked, Isabella began to notice details she had never paid attention to before. The way his hands moved with confidence, yet never hastily. The quiet focus in his eyes, the slight crease of concentration on his brow. He didn't rush, didn't complain, didn't seem concerned with status or appearance. He simply acted, and in that, Isabella saw a rare kind of strength, one she had rarely encountered in her own carefully curated circles of power. "I don't usually meet people like you," she said quietly, almost to herself. Her words felt strange, even unfamiliar, as if they were breaking through a barrier she had kept around herself for years. Ethan glanced at her and smiled faintly. "People come in all kinds," he replied, "and sometimes the best connections happen when we least expect them." Isabella looked away, staring at the mist-shrouded trees and the faint glow of the distant mountains. She realized that he was right. Her life had been filled with transactions, contracts, and strategic decisions. Friendships had been measured, relationships calculated. But here, in this moment, nothing needed to be measured. Nothing needed to be calculated. She was simply a woman, and he was simply a man willing to help. And that simplicity, she realized, was strangely beautiful. Ethan worked in silence for a while, his focus unwavering. Occasionally he would glance at her, checking to see if she was all right, but otherwise he let the night and the task guide him. Isabella watched him, her thoughts drifting back to her life in the city. The high-rise apartment, the designer clothes, the constant meetings and expectations. And yet none of that seemed important now. Here in the mountains, surrounded by fog and darkness, the world had narrowed to two people, a stranger and a woman in need. Finally, after what felt like hours but might have only been minutes, Ethan straightened and wiped his hands on a cloth he had pulled from his truck. "I think we're ready to try it," he said. Isabella's hands shook slightly as she reached for the key. She had been filled with apprehension, a mixture of fear and hope. She inserted the key, turned it, and held her breath. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. The car vibrated under her hands, the dashboard lights steady and strong once more. Relief washed over her in a wave so intense that she nearly cried. "It's working," she exclaimed, her voice breaking with emotion. Ethan smiled, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "Told you," he said. "Sometimes all it takes is a little patience." Isabella laughed softly, a sound that felt strange in the stillness of the night. She had spent so long relying on money, status, and planning to solve her problems, but none of that had helped her tonight. Instead, it was the kindness and skill of a stranger that had saved her. And in that realization, she felt a shift in her heart, a stirring of emotions she had long buried under layers of ambition and control. As she prepared to drive again, Isabella felt compelled to speak. I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice quieter now, more sincere. "You didn't have to stop. You didn't have to help me." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't help because I had to. I helped because it was the right thing to do. That's enough for me." Her eyes softened. That was a kind of generosity she had rarely experienced in her life, pure, without expectation or reward. She realized that she had spent years measuring people by what they could give her, what they could do for her. But Ethan had given without asking, without calculating, without expectation. And for the first time, Isabella understood the value of such an act. The night seemed a little less dark now, the fog a little less oppressive. As she drove slowly down the winding road, she found herself stealing glances at Ethan. Walking back to his truck, his movements calm and deliberate. There was something reassuring in his presence, something grounding that contrasted sharply with the uncertainty she had felt only moments ago. For the first time in a long while, Isabella allowed herself to think not of deadlines or meetings or financial gain, but simply of the moment. The cold air, the quiet road, the way the headlights cut through the fog, all of it felt vivid, real, alive. And in that vividness she felt a spark of gratitude, a fragile but growing warmth in her chest. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," she said again softly, as if speaking the words aloud might make them real. Ethan glanced over, a gentle smile on his face. "Maybe that's a good thing," he said. "Sometimes the people we meet by chance teach us more than the people we choose." The words lingered in her mind as the road stretched ahead. Isabella realized that this night, terrifying and unexpected as it had been, was already changing her. It was teaching her humility, patience, and the quiet power of kindness. It was reminding her that life was fragile, unpredictable, and precious, and that sometimes the most meaningful moments came not from control but from connection. As she drove, Isabella thought about the city she had left behind. The meetings, the deals, the carefully maintained image of power and wealth, all of it seemed distant, almost unreal. Here in the mountains she had been reminded of something she had almost forgotten: the importance of human connection, the value of simple gestures, and the way a stranger's kindness could touch a life in ways money never could. The fog began to thin slightly, revealing glimpses of the moon above and the jagged peaks of the mountains around her. She could feel the tension in her body easing, her heartbeat slowing, her thoughts clearing. And yet, beneath the relief, there was something deeper, a quiet awareness that her life had shifted in a subtle but permanent way. Ethan waved as she drove past, returning to his truck. Isabella caught his eye and smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile she realized she hadn't given in years. She knew she would never forget this night, never forget the stranger who had appeared when she was most vulnerable, and never forget the lesson he had quietly taught her. That true kindness required no reward, no recognition, only the willingness to act with compassion and courage. For the rest of the drive down the mountain, Isabella felt a new sense of clarity and purpose. She thought about the choices she had made in her life, the way she had relied on wealth and status to protect herself, and the way she had often overlooked the simple, human gestures that truly mattered. Tonight she had been reminded that life's most important lessons often came when she least expected them, and from those she least expected to teach them. By the time she reached the end of the mountain road, the fog had mostly cleared, revealing a sky full of stars. Isabella paused for a moment, looking up at the vast expanse above her, feeling small yet profoundly connected to the world around her. The BMW hummed steadily beneath her, a symbol of regained control, but it was her heart, not the car, that now carried the warmth and light of hope. And as she drove toward home, she knew that this night, this unexpected, frightening, yet transformative night would remain with her forever, a reminder that sometimes the kindness of a stranger could illuminate even the darkest path. The BMW purred steadily beneath Isabella as she drove down the mountain road, the fog beginning to thin and reveal glimpses of the starlit sky. Her heart still thumped with the memory of the night's events, the fear, the uncertainty, and above all, the kindness of a stranger who had appeared when she felt most helpless. She glanced briefly in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the rugged truck parked where Ethan had waited. A strange warmth filled her chest, one she could not quite name. For hours she had traveled the winding road, yet her mind was no longer focused on the journey itself. Instead, she found herself replaying every moment with Ethan. The calm steadiness of his hands as he worked on her car, the gentle tone of his voice when he asked about her well-being, the quiet patience with which he handled a situation that she would have expected anyone to find frustrating. There was something about him, something quietly powerful and comforting, that stirred emotions Isabella had long kept hidden behind walls of pride and control. She remembered the way he had looked at her when she admitted her fear, a look that was neither pity nor judgment but simple acknowledgement. For the first time in many years she felt seen, not as a wealthy businesswoman, not as someone defined by status or success, but as a human being, vulnerable and real. That feeling lingered with her now, deeper than any memory of material comfort she had ever known. The road stretched ahead, winding and unpredictable, yet Isabella felt a strange sense of freedom. She realized that she had spent so much of her life planning, controlling, and calculating, believing that certainty and power would protect her, but the events of the night had reminded her of a truth she had long forgotten. Life was fragile, and sometimes the most important lessons came from moments of vulnerability. As she drove, she thought about the kind stranger who had changed the course of her night. She didn't even know his last name or where he lived or how he had come to be on this road at precisely the right moment. Yet his presence had made all the difference. Isabella reflected on the countless times she had relied on her wealth, her influence, or her carefully constructed image to navigate challenges. And yet none of that had helped her tonight. Instead, it had been someone she had never met before, someone who had acted without expectation or reward, who had restored her sense of hope. The thought made her feel both humbled and grateful. She realized that she had often underestimated the value of simple human gestures, the kind of quiet kindness that required nothing in return. Ethan's actions had reminded her that true generosity was not measured in money or status, but in presence, effort, and compassion. It was a lesson Isabella had rarely needed to learn before, but one she would never forget now. She continued down the road, her hands gripping the wheel a little more loosely than before. The tension that had held her stiff for hours was easing, replaced by a reflective calm. She considered the life she had led, the relationships she had built, and the way she had often judged people by what they could provide her, rather than who they were. Ethan had shown her a different perspective, a reminder that human connection, honesty, and empathy were more valuable than any financial success. The car's headlights illuminated the road ahead, revealing the silhouettes of trees and distant peaks. Isabella noticed the way the mountains seemed to stretch endlessly, vast and timeless. She felt a sense of humility in the presence of nature's enormity, a realization that she was but a small part of a much larger world. Yet in that smallness there was a newfound freedom. For the first time, she understood that vulnerability was not weakness. It was the doorway to growth, reflection, and authentic connection. She thought again about Ethan and wondered what had driven him to help her. He had not asked for payment, he had not demanded recognition, and yet he had taken the time to ensure her safety. It was a simple act, yet it carried a depth of meaning Isabella could hardly articulate. She realized that kindness in its truest form was transformative. It could reach into moments of fear and despair, changing the course of a life in ways that nothing else could. As she drove further, Isabella found herself imagining a conversation with him, though she knew it might never happen. She wanted to ask him about his life, about the experiences that had shaped his calm, compassionate nature. She wanted to understand what gave him the strength to act with such patience and empathy, and she wanted more than anything to express her gratitude not just for his help, but for the lesson he had unwittingly imparted. The road began to descend gradually, the mountain slopes giving way to gentler hills. Isabella felt a subtle shift within her, a growing awareness that her life had changed even if in a small, unseen way. She realized that fear had a purpose. It stripped away pretense, leaving only the essentials: courage, kindness, and the willingness to accept help. And in that stripped-down state, she had discovered a truth that no amount of money, power, or status could ever provide. She remembered the precise moment when she had first seen Ethan's truck approaching, the sense of relief that had washed over her like a wave. At that moment, she had recognized her own fragility, her reliance on the familiar structures of her life and the discomfort of facing uncertainty. Yet alongside that fear, there had been a spark of hope, a quiet belief that someone would appear to help. And that belief, now proven true, had left a mark on her heart, one that would influence the way she viewed others and perhaps even herself. In the days to come, Isabella's thoughts drifted to the countless decisions she had made over the years, the ones guided by strategy rather than emotion, by calculation rather than compassion. She realized that in her pursuit of success she had sometimes overlooked the human connections that gave life meaning. Tonight, on this dark, fog-covered mountain road, she had experienced a connection that transcended wealth, status, and expectation. It was a reminder that the simplest gestures often carried the deepest significance. The stars had begun to peek through the dissipating fog, casting a soft, silvery light across the road. Isabella felt a quiet peace settle over her, a calm that was unfamiliar yet welcome. She recognized that she had been given more than just assistance with her car. She had been given a glimpse into a different way of living, one rooted in empathy, patience, and openness to others. As she drove on, Isabella reflected on the person she had been before this night. She had been confident, ambitious, and determined, yet often isolated in her own world. She had relied on her wealth and influence as shields, sometimes keeping herself at a distance from those who might have offered genuine connection. But now she felt the beginnings of a transformation, a willingness to open her heart, to accept help, and to recognize the value of kindness in its purest form. The road straightened, and she could see the faint glow of a distant town. Safety and familiarity were approaching, yet Isabella felt a reluctance to leave the mountains behind. This night had been a turning point, a rare encounter that would remain etched in her memory. She realized that the world was larger, more unpredictable, and more beautiful than she had allowed herself to see. And within that vastness, human connection, no matter how brief or unexpected, could illuminate the darkest paths. Isabella's mind returned once again to Ethan. She wondered if he had a family, a home, a life filled with stories she could never imagine. She wondered what other people he had helped, quietly and without recognition, and she wondered if he would ever know the impact he had made on her, how a simple act of kindness had shifted her perspective and touched her heart in ways that nothing else could. For the first time in years, Isabella felt a vulnerability that was not frightening, but liberating. She understood that to live fully, she needed to embrace uncertainty, accept help when offered, and allow herself to connect with others without fear or expectation. Tonight had been a lesson in humility, empathy, and the quiet power of human kindness, a lesson she knew she would carry with her forever. The BMW hummed steadily along the road, the town's lights growing brighter ahead. Isabella's hands rested lightly on the wheel, her shoulders relaxed, her mind filled with gratitude and reflection. The mountains were behind her now, but the memory of their fog-covered peaks, the darkness, and the stranger who had guided her through it would remain with her always. And as she drove into the town, Isabella understood something profound. Life's most meaningful moments often arrived unannounced, through acts of compassion from those we least expect. The night had begun with fear and uncertainty, but it would end with a lesson that transcended status, wealth, and control. A lesson that would stay with her for the rest of her life. For the first time in years, Isabella felt truly seen, truly connected, and truly alive. The town lights were now visible in the distance, casting a soft glow that promised warmth, safety, and familiarity. Isabella's hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, but her mind was far from the comfort of her city apartment. Her thoughts were consumed with Ethan, the stranger who had appeared when she had been stranded, the man whose quiet patience and unwavering kindness had turned a night of fear into a night of hope. Even as the BMW hummed steadily along the road, she found herself reflecting on how simple the act had been. Ethan had not asked for payment or recognition. He had not demanded that she follow instructions or submit to his authority. He had simply seen a person in need and chosen to help. And in that simplicity, Isabella saw a power that her world of luxury, status, and influence rarely offered: authenticity. She remembered the precise moment he had first smiled at her, a smile that conveyed calm reassurance and confidence without arrogance. It was a rare kind of smile, one that seemed to speak directly to the heart rather than the mind. She realized that she had spent so much of her life responding to appearances, to calculated gestures, to shallow expressions of goodwill, but Ethan's actions, so simple and unassuming, carried a depth of meaning she had not anticipated. The BMW rolled along, and Isabella's thoughts turned inward. For years she had relied on money, power, and connections to navigate life's challenges. She had prided herself on her ability to control outcomes, to predict results, and to manage every detail with precision. But tonight none of that had mattered. She had been forced to confront vulnerability, uncertainty, and the raw unpredictability of life. And in doing so, she had encountered something far more valuable than any material possession: genuine human kindness. She could feel her heart softening, the walls she had built around herself beginning to crumble. It was a strange, almost unsettling feeling to realize that she had allowed herself to become so insulated from the world. But alongside the unease was a sense of liberation. For the first time in years, she could see the world not as a place of transactions and expectations, but as a place of possibility, connection, and genuine compassion. Isabella remembered the look in Ethan's eyes when she had admitted her fear. There had been no judgment, no condescension, only recognition of her humanity. That simple acknowledgement had been more powerful than any advice, any reassurance, or any monetary solution she could have received. It was a lesson she knew she would carry with her for the rest of her life. That true connection required presence, patience, and empathy, not wealth or status. As she drove, she thought about the countless people she had met in her life: colleagues, clients, acquaintances, many of whom had interacted with her for what she could offer, for what she could do for them, for the opportunities her life could provide. But Ethan had been different. He had offered something far rarer: his time, his effort, and his care without expectation of reward. It was a kind of generosity that she had rarely encountered, and it touched her deeply. The memory of Ethan working on the car lingered vividly in her mind. She remembered the careful precision of his hands, the way he checked every connection, every wire, every moving part with patience and attention. He had not rushed, had not complained, had not sought recognition. He had acted out of a simple, profound desire to help. Isabella realized that in witnessing his actions, she had glimpsed a model of integrity and compassion she had long admired, but rarely encountered in her daily life. As the town grew closer, Isabella's thoughts shifted to the future. She wanted to express her gratitude, but she knew words might never be enough. Ethan had not sought thanks, yet she felt a deep, almost urgent need to acknowledge the impact he had had on her. His presence had shifted something fundamental within her, a recognition of the value of kindness, the importance of connection, and the necessity of humility. For a moment, she considered turning back, searching for his truck to thank him personally, but she realized that was not necessary. The gesture itself, the act of his presence and care, was enough. And yet, she felt compelled to carry that lesson forward, to integrate it into her life in a way that would honor what he had given her. The town lights grew brighter, revealing the familiar streets, the glowing windows, and the distant hum of life. Isabella felt a mixture of relief and melancholy. Relief that she had reached safety, that her journey down the mountain was ending. Melancholy that the moment with Ethan, so profound and transformative, might remain fleeting. Yet even as she approached her apartment building, she felt a quiet resolve. She would not let this experience fade. She would carry it with her, a guiding light in the midst of her fast-paced, high-pressure life. She parked the BMW and sat for a moment, letting the engine cool, allowing the lessons of the night to settle within her. She thought again about fear, the way it had gripped her on the mountain road, the vulnerability it had exposed, and the way it had opened her heart to connection. Fear, she realized, was not always something to be conquered or suppressed. Sometimes it was a gateway, a teacher, a reminder of what truly mattered. Her phone buzzed, signaling a message from a colleague, a routine work matter, trivial in comparison to what she had just experienced. Isabella smiled softly, a small but genuine smile, and set the phone aside. The world of business, deadlines, and expectations could wait. Tonight had shown her something far more important: the quiet, transformative power of a simple gesture, an act of care, a willingness to step into someone else's life and help without expectation. She reflected on the contrast between her usual life and the night she had endured. The high-rise apartment, the luxury clothing, the meticulously planned schedules, all had provided comfort, yes, but not the profound sense of connection she had felt with Ethan. For the first time, she understood that life's richness was measured not in possessions but in experiences, relationships, and the moments of authentic human kindness that left a lasting impression on the heart. Isabella's thoughts turned inward, considering how she might integrate this newfound awareness into her life. She wanted to be more present, more attentive, more willing to offer kindness without expectation. She wanted to seek connections not for personal gain, but for the simple joy of connecting with another human being. And she wanted to carry the memory of Ethan's selfless actions as a reminder that generosity, patience, and empathy were not just virtues. They were essential to living fully and meaningfully. As she stepped out of the BMW and into the warmth of her apartment building, Isabella felt a quiet sense of gratitude. She had been given more than assistance with her car. She had been given a glimpse into a way of being that transcended wealth, power, and status. She had been reminded of the beauty of human connection, the importance of humility, and the enduring impact of kindness. She thought once more of Ethan, imagining him returning to his life, perhaps unaware of the profound effect he had had on her. She hoped he knew, at least somehow, that his actions mattered, that the patience, effort, and care he had offered had transformed a moment of fear into a lasting memory of hope and reflection. Isabella realized that this night had marked a turning point in her life. She had been reminded that true strength lay not in control, but in the willingness to embrace vulnerability, to accept help, and to recognize the significance of simple gestures. She had been shown that the world could offer profound beauty, even in moments of fear and uncertainty, if one was willing to remain open and receptive. The memory of the fog-shrouded mountain road, the darkness, and the small, steady truck would remain with her forever. But more than that, she would carry with her the understanding that the heart of life's meaning lay in connection, compassion, and the quiet, transformative power of human kindness. As she closed the door to her apartment, Isabella felt a sense of peace she had not known for years. The night had begun with fear, uncertainty, and isolation, but it had ended with insight, gratitude, and a renewed awareness of what truly mattered. And though Ethan might never be a part of her daily life, the lessons he had imparted through his actions would continue to guide her, reminding her that even in the darkest moments, a simple gesture of kindness could illuminate the path forward. The days that followed the night on the mountain were different for Isabella. She returned to her usual routine, meetings, phone calls, and endless schedules. But something inside her had shifted. The memory of the fog-covered road, the cold wind, and the kindness of a stranger lingered like a quiet, persistent echo. She found herself thinking of Ethan, wondering if he had continued his life as if nothing had happened, unaware of the profound impact he had left on her. At first, she tried to return to her old habits, telling herself that life demanded efficiency, control, and precision. Yet each time she opened an email or prepared for a meeting, her mind wandered back to the mountain road. She recalled the exact way Ethan had examined the engine, the steady patience in his movements, the quiet assurance of his presence. He had not spoken many words, yet every action had carried meaning, compassion, empathy, and a willingness to help without expectation. Isabella realized that for years, she had been living in a bubble of her own creation. Her world had been built around wealth, status, and careful control, leaving little room for vulnerability or authentic connection. But the night on the mountain had reminded her that life was fragile, unpredictable, and full of moments that could not be bought or scheduled. Those moments, she now understood, were the ones that mattered most. She began to notice subtle changes in herself. She listened more attentively during conversations, noticing the small details she had once overlooked. She smiled more genuinely, and she found herself offering help without calculating its worth. Even small acts, a kind word to a colleague, a simple gesture to a neighbor, felt meaningful in ways she had never anticipated. Despite these changes, she could not shake her thoughts of Ethan. Who was he? What had brought him to that lonely mountain road at exactly the right time? She wanted to see him again, to thank him properly, to understand the man behind the selfless act. But she also knew that some encounters were meant to remain mysterious, serving as reminders of what life could teach when least expected. One evening, she found herself walking along the city streets, reflecting on the night that had altered her perspective. The lights of the city were bright, almost harsh compared to the soft glow of the stars she had seen on the mountain. Yet even here, in the midst of the bustling crowd, she felt the quiet influence of that night. The memory of Ethan's calm presence, his simple generosity, and the lesson of human connection lingered in her heart, guiding her actions and thoughts. She realized that the night had given her more than a lesson in kindness. It had shown her the importance of humility. For the first time in years, she felt free to acknowledge her vulnerabilities, to admit that she could not control everything, and to accept that help from others was not a weakness, but a gift. The mountains had taught her that even the strongest people sometimes needed support, and that allowing oneself to receive it could be transformative. Isabella began to integrate these lessons into her daily life. At work, she became more patient, more understanding, and more willing to listen. She sought to connect with people on a deeper level, valuing authenticity over appearances. She offered help to those who needed it, not out of obligation, but from a genuine desire to make a positive difference. Every time she acted in kindness, she felt a quiet satisfaction, a reminder of the night that had changed her forever. Yet despite these changes, there remained a quiet longing in her heart, a desire to see Ethan again, to express the gratitude she felt more deeply than words could convey. She imagined finding him, sharing a coffee, or simply speaking about the night and the lessons he had imparted. She wondered if he realized the profound impact of his actions, or if he had continued his life unaware of the difference he had made. One weekend, unable to resist the pull of the memory, Isabella returned to the outskirts of the city, driving toward the winding roads that led into the mountains. The familiar curves and bends brought a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She did not know if she would find Ethan, but she felt compelled to try. She needed to honor the moment, to acknowledge the quiet, powerful act that had reshaped her understanding of life, kindness, and connection. As she drove slowly, scanning the edges of the road, her heart skipped when she saw a truck parked in a familiar spot, its headlights off but unmistakably rugged and reliable. Her pulse quickened and she parked carefully nearby. She stepped out of the BMW, her breath visible in the crisp evening air. The mountains loomed around her, serene yet imposing, and the fog that had once enveloped her now seemed gentle, almost welcoming. "Ethan," she called softly, unsure if she would even be heard. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and calm, a small smile lighting his face as he recognized her. "Isabella," he said, his voice steady and warm. "I wondered if you would ever come back." She smiled, a genuine expression of relief and gratitude. I had to, she said. I needed to thank you properly. You changed that night for me, not just because you helped me, but because you showed me something I had forgotten. The value of kindness, patience, and human connection. Ethan nodded, his eyes reflecting a quiet understanding. I'm glad, he said simply. Sometimes the smallest gestures make the biggest difference. They walked together along the edge of the road, the mountains looming silently around them. Isabella felt a sense of peace, of resolution, unlike anything she had experienced before. She realized that this meeting, unlike their first encounter, was not about fear or vulnerability. It was about acknowledgement, reflection, and the quiet celebration of an unspoken bond formed in the darkness and uncertainty of the mountain night. I never expected anything, Ethan said, his voice calm. I just saw someone in need and helped. That's all it was. But it was everything to me, Isabella replied, her voice soft but firm. You reminded me that life is not just about wealth, control, or appearances. It's about people, connection, and the courage to be vulnerable. They stood together for a moment in silence, the cool mountain air surrounding them, the distant lights of the city sparkling like stars below. Isabella felt a profound gratitude, a sense of clarity she had not known before. The night, which had begun with fear and uncertainty, had evolved into something beautiful and transformative. Ethan smiled faintly. I'm glad you remember that, he said. It's easy to forget in the middle of our busy lives, but sometimes it takes a single night, a single act, to remind us of what really matters. Isabella nodded, feeling a warmth in her heart. It did more than remind me. It changed me, and I want to carry that with me every day, in every action, in every choice. The mountains were quiet around them, the fog lifting to reveal a clear sky and the glow of distant stars. Isabella realized that the fear she had felt on the mountain road was no longer frightening. It had served a purpose to open her heart, to remind her of her humanity, and to guide her toward a deeper understanding of life's meaning. She looked at Ethan, feeling a connection that was both profound and simple. I don't know if I can ever repay you, she said, but I want you to know that your actions have left a lasting mark on me. You taught me something I will never forget. Ethan smiled, a quiet satisfaction in his expression. That's enough, he said. The rest is up to you. How you carry it forward, how you live it, and how you share it with others. Isabella felt a sense of resolve. She knew that life would continue, filled with its challenges, uncertainties, and daily pressures, but she also knew that she had been given a gift far more valuable than any material possession, the reminder of the transformative power of human kindness and the understanding that true strength lay not in control, but in empathy, connection, and courage. As they parted ways, Isabella felt a profound gratitude and a sense of completion. The night that had begun with fear, uncertainty, and isolation had ended with insight, growth, and hope. She realized that life was full of unexpected encounters, and that sometimes the most meaningful moments came when least expected, from people who appeared in the right place at the right time, offering help not for reward but out of compassion. Driving back toward the city, Isabella felt lighter, freer, and more alive than she had in years. The BMW hummed steadily beneath her, but it was her heart that carried the true momentum, propelled by gratitude, reflection, and the quiet joy of knowing that one act of kindness could indeed change everything. And as she looked out at the stars twinkling above the mountains, she made a silent promise to carry the lessons of that night forward, to value people over possessions, connection over control, and kindness over calculation. The memory of Ethan, the stranger who had appeared when she needed him most, would forever serve as a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could be found in the simplest of gestures. That night, Isabella understood something she had long forgotten. Life's richest treasures were not measured in wealth, status, or material success, but in the moments of authentic human connection, the courage to be vulnerable, and the enduring power of kindness. And with that understanding, she smiled, feeling her life transformed in ways she had never anticipated, knowing that the night on the mountain and the stranger who had changed everything would remain with her forever.